In a galaxy where humans are considered the weakest species, where ancient dragon empires have ruled for millennia with their advanced technology and mystical powers, one simple act of kindness from a human woman would shake the foundations of cosmic order itself. The Galactic Council had written humanity off as a primitive species barely worth notice. Dragons, with their thousand-year lifespans and mastery over both magic and technology, saw humans as nothing more than curious pets at best, pests at worst. But they had never encountered someone like Dr. Sarachun. What happens when the most powerful beings in the universe find themselves helpless, and the only one willing to help is from the species they've always considered beneath them? What happens when two ancient dragon lords, rulers of vast empires, owe their very lives to a human who asked for nothing in return? The Emperor's army surrounds her modest home at dawn, expecting to find a traitor harboring enemies of the state. Instead, they're about to discover that humanity's greatest strength isn't in their weapons or technology. It's in their inexplicable willingness to show mercy to those who have never shown them any. This is the story of how one human woman's compassion triggered the greatest shift in galactic politics in over 10,000 years. This is the story of how humanity finally earned its place among the stars, not through conquest, but through something far more powerful. Dr. Sarachun pulled her thermal coat tighter as she trudged through the knee-deep snow toward the massive shapes she'd spotted from a research station. The twin moons of Kepler, 442b, cast eerie shadows across the frozen landscape, making the two forms look even more mysterious in the pale light. Her breath formed crystalline clouds in the -40 atmosphere as she approached what she initially thought were crashed spacecraft. But as she got closer, her scientific mind struggled to process what she was seeing. These weren't ships at all. They were creatures. Massive, reptilian creatures with wings folded against their bodies, scales that seemed to shimmer even in the dim moonlight. And, most shocking of all, they were clearly alive, though barely. Dragons. Actual dragons. On a planet that was supposed to be uninhabited except for her small research outpost. Sarah had been stationed on this ice world for 8 months, studying the planet's unique crystalline formations that seemed to amplify certain electromagnetic frequencies. The Galactic Council had assigned her this remote posting as part of humanity's contribution to the greater galactic community, though she knew it was really just busy work to keep humans occupied and out of the way of more important species. The larger of the two dragons stirred slightly as her footsteps crunched in the snow nearby. One massive eye, easily the size of Sarah's head, cracked open and fixed on her with an intelligence that made her breath catch. The eye was a deep amber color, ancient and weary, filled with what she could only describe as resigned dignity. "Easy there, big fellow," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. She approached slowly, her hands visible and empty. Years of working with injured wildlife on Earth had taught her that even the most dangerous creatures could sense intention. The dragon's eye tracked her movement, but it made no aggressive moves. It couldn't, Sarah realized with growing alarm. Both creatures were suffering from severe hypothermia. Their scales, which should have been warm to the touch according to everything she knew about dragon physiology, were ice-cold and covered with frost. Their breathing was labored and shallow. These beings, who were supposed to be among the most powerful entities in the known galaxy, were dying. Sarah's training kicked in. She activated her portable environmental scanner and quickly assessed their condition. The readings were grim. Both dragons were in advanced stages of hypothermia and dehydration. Their core body temperatures had dropped dangerously low, and their biosignatures were failing rapidly. "I need to get you somewhere warm," she said aloud, though she wasn't sure if they could understand human speech. Dragons were known to be incredibly intelligent, with some speaking dozens of galactic languages, but these two seemed beyond communication at the moment. Her research station was only half a kilometer away, but it was designed for one human, not two massive dragons. Each creature was easily 20 meters long with wingspans that would dwarf her entire facility. But The main laboratory bay had been built large enough to accommodate heavy equipment deliveries. It would have to do. Sarah activated her emergency protocols and fired up the station's most powerful anti-grav haulers. The machines hummed to life, their repulsors creating a stable field beneath the first dragon. The creatures I followed her as she worked, and she thought she detected something like gratitude in that ancient gaze. "I'm going to move you now," she explained, adjusting the field strength. "It might be uncomfortable, but I need to get you inside before your body temperature drops any further." The dragon made a sound, barely audible over the wind, that might have been an attempt at communication. Sarah took it as consent and slowly began moving the massive creature toward her station. It took her 3 hours to transport both dragons into her laboratory. By the time she had them positioned on the heated deck plating, her thermal suit was running low on power, and her muscles ached from the constant adjustments needed to maneuver such massive beings through the station's corridors. The laboratory bay was now completely dominated by the two dragons. They lay side by side, their great heads near the warmth of the main heating units. Sarah had activated every thermal system in the station, routing power from non-essential systems to boost the temperature as quickly as safely possible. As warmth began to fill the chamber, the changes in the dragons were immediate and remarkable. Their scales began to shift color, taking on deeper, more vibrant hues. The larger dragon's scales shifted from dull gray to a deep emerald green with veins of gold running along the edges. The smaller one revealed scales of brilliant sapphire blue with silver highlights that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Both creatures' breathing became deeper and more regular. The tension in their massive frames began to relax as their core temperatures slowly climbed back towards safe levels. Sarah spent the next 6 hours monitoring their vital signs and adjusting their environment. She set up intravenous drips with specialized electrolyte solutions, drawing on her xenobiology training to adapt human medical equipment for their unique physiology. She prepared warming blankets, configured atmospheric controls, and even rigged up a hydration system that would provide them with clean water when they were strong enough to drink. Throughout this process, both dragons watched her with growing awareness. Their eyes tracked her movements with keen intelligence, and she began to sense a form of communication between them. Not spoken words, but something deeper. Occasionally, she would catch what seemed like approving rumbles from one or both of them as she made adjustments to their care. As the station's chronometer showed the approach of dawn, the larger dragon finally attempted to speak. The voice that emerged was deep and resonant, though weak with exhaustion. The words were in galactic standard, the common language of interstellar commerce and diplomacy. "Human," the voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Why do you help us?" Sarah paused in her monitoring tasks and turned to meet those ancient amber eyes. It was a fair question. Dragons and humans had no particular relationship in galactic society. Dragons were apex predators, rulers of star systems, beings of immense power and influence. Humans were still trying to prove they belonged in space at all. "Because you needed help," she said simply, "and I could provide it." The dragon's great head tilted slightly, as if this answer puzzled him. "Do you know who we are?" Sarah shrugged. "You're dragons. You're hurt. That's all that mattered." A long silence stretched between them. The second dragon, the blue-scaled one, had been listening intently. Now she spoke for the first time, her voice lighter but no less powerful than her companions. "I am Morelii of the Sapphire Court, Duchess of the Outer Rim Territories, commander of the Third Fleet." Her voice carried the weight of authority even in her weakened state. "And this is Theron of the Emerald Throne, Lord of the Central Systems, High Admiral of the Dragon Imperial Navy." Sarah blinked. Even she, isolated as she was on this research posting, knew those names. These weren't just any dragons. These were two of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, rulers of vast interstellar empires, beings who controlled the fates of billions of sentient creatures across hundreds of star systems. and they had been dying in the snow outside her modest research station. "What happened to you?" she asked, checking their vital signs again. Both were showing steady improvement, but they were still far from full strength. Theron and Lyralii exchanged what Sarah was beginning to recognize as their form of silent communication. Finally, Theron spoke. "Betrayal," he said simply. "We were summoned to a diplomatic meeting on the neutral world of Centauri Prime, a gathering to discuss territorial disputes between our empires. Instead, we found ourselves drugged and transported here, left to die in your planet's frozen wastes." "Someone wanted you dead," Sarah said. "It wasn't a question. Someone who knew that our deaths would destabilize the entire galactic balance of power," Lyralii added. "Our empires have been in careful equilibrium for centuries. Without us, there would be chaos. Wars that would consume entire sectors." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the planet's cold climate. She was harboring two of the galaxy's most important political figures, both of whom had been targeted for assassination. And if their enemies had gone to such elaborate lengths to kill them, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate any witnesses, including one very isolated human researcher. As if reading her thoughts, Theron spoke again. "We have put you in considerable danger by accepting your aid, Dr. Chun." She started. "You know my name? Your identification was in your research files. We accessed them while you were working." Lyralii's tone held a note of apology. "Dragon neural interfaces can interact with most galactic standard computer systems. We meant no intrusion, but we needed to understand who had saved us. And what we discovered," Theron continued, "was most remarkable. Dr. Sarah Chun, xenobiologist, stationed here alone for the past 8 months, studying crystalline formations. No political affiliations. No ties to any of the major galactic powers. No reason whatsoever to risk yourself for strangers. Yet you did," Lyralii observed. "Without question, without hesitation, without asking for payment or favor. You simply helped." Sarah felt uncomfortable under their intense scrutiny. It's what anyone would have done. Both dragons made sounds that might have been laughter, though there was no humor in it. "No, Dr. Chun," Theron said seriously. "It is not what anyone would have done. It is what humans do. And that makes you far more dangerous to certain parties than you might realize." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Her communication console lit up with incoming priority signals, and the external sensors showed massive energy signatures approaching the planet's atmosphere. Multiple ships, military configurations, and they were heading directly for her research station. "It seems," Lyralii said grimly, "that our enemies have discovered where we are." Sarah stared at the sensor readings, her mind racing. Whoever had tried to kill these dragons was now coming to finish the job, and she was caught directly in the middle of a conflict that could reshape the galaxy. The external communications array crackled to life. A cold, authoritative voice filled the laboratory. "Research Station Kepler, 442b, Alpha. This is Admiral Vex of the Dragon Imperial Navy. You will surrender the traitors you are harboring immediately or face the consequences of interfering with Imperial justice." Sarah looked at Theron and Lyralii, who had both gone very still. "Admiral Vex," Theron said quietly, "my own second-in-command." The betrayal went even deeper than they had thought. And now Sarah Chun, a human xenobiologist who had simply tried to help 2 freezing creatures, found herself at the center of the most dangerous political crisis in galactic history. Outside, the first of the Imperial ships began their descent toward the station, their weapons charging with deadly intent. Sarah's hands flew over her workstation controls as the Imperial ships descended through the atmosphere like metallic predators. The readings were terrifying: 12 dreadnoughts, each one capable of reducing her research station to vapor with a single volley. Admiral Vex clearly wasn't taking any chances. "How long before they reach us?" Theron asked, struggling to rise to his full height. Even weakened, the ancient Dragon Lord was an imposing sight, his emerald scales now gleaming with returned vitality. 15 minutes, maybe less," Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces as she activated the station's emergency protocols. But my communication array is still active. I can try to contact the Galactic Council, get help. No. Lyraliai's voice cut through her planning like a blade. The sapphire dragon had managed to prop herself up on her powerful forearms, though Sarah could see the effort it cost her. Vex would not act without support from other council members. This conspiracy runs deeper than we initially believed. Sarah's blood ran cold. You're saying the Galactic Council itself is involved in trying to kill you? Not all of them, Theron said grimly, but enough. There have been factions pushing for a complete restructuring of galactic governance for decades. Our deaths would provide the crisis they need to seize control. The communication array crackled again. Admiral Vex's voice was closer now, more menacing. Dr. Chun, you have 10 minutes to surrender the fugitives. After that, we will consider you a collaborator and act accordingly. Sarah stared at the two massive beings she had saved. In the past few hours, they had regained much of their strength, but they were still far from their full power. Even if they were at peak condition, 12 Imperial dreadnoughts would be a significant challenge. There has to be something we can do, she muttered, pulling up the station's defensive capabilities on her screens. What she saw was pathetically inadequate. Basic shields designed to deflect debris, not military-grade weapons. Dr. Chun, Theron said gently, you have already done far more than duty required. We cannot ask you to risk your life further for our sake. You're not asking, Sarah replied firmly, her jaw setting in a way that would have been familiar to anyone who knew her well. I am choosing. She turned to face both dragons directly. You said someone wanted to destabilize galactic politics. If you die, what happens to your people? Your empires? Lyraliai and Theron exchanged another of their silent communications. Finally, Lyraliai spoke. Civil war, she said simply. Multiple factions within each empire would claim succession rights. The conflicts would spread to neighboring systems, then to allied territories. Within a solar year, half the galaxy would be at war. And during that chaos, Theron added, certain parties would position themselves to emerge as the new galactic authority. A more centralized form of government than has existed before. Sarah nodded grimly. She might just be a xenobiologist from minor species, but she understood power politics well enough. So they eliminate you too, let everyone else tear each other apart, then step in as saviors to restore order. Under their terms, Lyraliai confirmed. Well then, Sarah said, turning back to her controls with renewed determination. We can't let that happen. She began pulling up files she had never expected to need. Detailed geological surveys of the planet's unique crystalline formations. Her research over the past 8 months had revealed something extraordinary about Kepler. 442b's crystal structures. They didn't just amplify electromagnetic frequencies. Under the right conditions, they could store and redirect massive amounts of energy. What are you planning? Theron asked, noting her sudden, focused intensity. Your people underestimated my species once before, Sarah said, her fingers flying over multiple calculations. They're about to do it again. She activated the station's mining equipment and began inputting coordinates for the largest crystalline formation within range. A massive structure she had discovered 3 months earlier, but had been too cautious to fully investigate. The formation was located directly beneath the station, extending down through the planet's crust like a vast underground cathedral. Dr. Chun, Lyraliai said urgently, what are you doing? Something probably very stupid, Sarah admitted, initiating the mining sequence. But I've been studying these crystals for months. They have properties that don't fit any known material science. Under stress, they don't just conduct energy, they multiply it. External sensors showed the Imperial fleet taking position in a perfect bombardment formation above the station. Sarah could imagine Admiral Vex on his flagship, savoring the moment before he eliminated the 2 dragons who stood between him and ultimate power. 5 minutes until weapons range, she announced, watching the countdown timer on her screen. Deep beneath the station, massive drilling equipment had broken through into the crystal formation. Sarah's instruments immediately detected the reaction she had hoped for. The crystals were beginning to resonate with the station's power grid, drawing energy and amplifying it in ways that defied conventional physics. "I need you both to do something for me," Sarah said, turning to the two dragons. "Can you generate bioelectric energy? Some kind of natural electrical discharge." Both dragons looked puzzled, but Theron nodded slowly. "All dragons can generate electrical fields. It's part of our natural defenses. But we're still weakened." "I don't need maximum power," Sarah interrupted. "I just need enough to create a resonance cascade in the crystal matrix. Can you do it?" "Perhaps," Lyralii said carefully. "But to what purpose?" Sarah's smile was grim. "Admiral Vex thinks he's hunting wounded prey. He's about to discover that humans didn't earn their place in galactic society by being weak. We earned it by being unpredictable." The station shuddered as the Imperial fleet reached optimal firing position. Through the external cameras, Sarah could see the massive dreadnoughts hanging in space like dark angels of death, their weapons arrays glowing with lethal energy. "Dr. Chun," Admiral Vex's voice came over the communication system one final time. "Your time is up." "Actually," Sarah replied, keying the transmission to broadcast on all frequencies, "I think your time is up, Admiral." She activated the final sequence of her plan. The drilling equipment sent a massive electrical pulse directly into the heart of the crystalline formation. Simultaneously, she turned to Theron and Lyralii. "Now!" Both dragons, despite their weakened condition, summoned their natural bioelectric abilities. Twin streams of dragon-generated electricity coursed through the station's modified power grid and down into the crystal matrix below. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The entire planet began to glow. Every crystal formation on Kepler 442b suddenly blazed with stored energy, creating a network of interconnected power sources that spanned the globe. The energy levels climbing past anything Sarah had ever imagined possible. "Impossible!" Admiral Vex's voice came through the communication system, now filled with shock and confusion rather than cold confidence. "Nothing's impossible," Sarah replied calmly. "You just have to be creative." The crystalline network had reached critical resonance. Sarah activated the final component of her plan, an array of modified communication satellites she had deployed for her research. But instead of broadcasting scientific data, they were now channeling the planet's entire crystal matrix into a focused transmission beam. The beam struck the lead Imperial dreadnought with the force of a small star. The massive warship's shields flared brilliant white, then simply vanished. Emergency alarms could be heard even through the communication link as the ship's systems overloaded and failed. Similar beams began striking the other vessels as Sarah adjusted the targeting parameters. "Retreat." Admiral Vex's voice was now edged with panic. "All ships retreat. Emergency jump protocols." But Sarah had thought of that too. The crystal network's energy output was interfering with the ship's navigation systems, making faster-than-light jumps impossible. The Imperial fleet was trapped in orbit around a planet that had suddenly become a massive weapon. "Admiral Vex," Sarah's voice carried across all communication frequencies with the authority of someone who held the power of an entire world. "You came here to commit murder and treason. You will leave here as prisoners, or you will not leave at all." Through the external cameras, she could see the Imperial ships trying desperately to maneuver out of range of the crystal beams. Several had already suffered critical damage, their hulls scarred and systems failing. "You cannot hold us indefinitely, human," Vex snarled over the communication link. "I don't need to hold you indefinitely," Sarah replied. "I just need to hold you long enough." As if summoned by her words, new contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. Ships emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. But these weren't Imperial vessels. "The Seventh Fleet," Theron said with satisfaction, recognizing the energy signatures. "My personal command." "And the Sapphire Guard," Lyralii added as more ships appeared. "It seems our people have been searching for us." Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief as friendly forces flooded into the system. The Crystal Network was still maintaining its energy output, keeping the rogue Imperial ships disabled, but now help had arrived to handle the actual arrests. Admiral Vex's fleet found themselves suddenly surrounded by forces loyal to Theron and Lyralii. Ships that had been frantically trying to escape were now being systematically disabled and boarded by their own people. Ow! Admiral Vex's voice was hollow with defeat. Theron answered, his voice carrying across the communication frequencies with the full weight of his authority. You underestimated our human friend, Admiral, and you underestimated the loyalty of our true followers. Through her workstation, Sarah could monitor the boarding actions as the conspiracy was systematically exposed. Admiral Vex and his co-conspirators were being taken into custody, their communications and computer systems providing evidence of the broader plot. But as the immediate crisis ended, Sarah became aware of a new problem. The Crystal Network was still active, still channeling massive amounts of energy. And, according to her instruments, the energy levels were continuing to climb. We have a new problem, she announced to the two dragons. The resonance cascade isn't stopping. The crystals are continuing to build energy, and I'm not sure how to shut it down. Lyralii and Theron both focused on the readings Sarah was showing them. Their expressions grew increasingly concerned. How much energy can a crystal store? Theron asked. Sarah checked her calculations twice before answering. Based on these readings, enough to crack the planet's crust. The three of them stared at each other in the growing light emanating from the Crystal Network. Sarah had saved the dragons, stopped the conspiracy, and prevented a galactic civil war. But in the process, she might have accidentally created a weapon that could destroy an entire world. Outside, the crystal formations continued to pulse with ever-increasing intensity, and Sarah realized that her greatest challenge was yet to come. The crystal formations across Kepler 442b pulsed with increasing intensity, casting eerie shadows through the research station's observation windows. Sarah's instruments showed energy levels that defied every safety protocol she knew. The planet itself was becoming a massive battery, and it was overcharging. How long before critical failure? Lyralii asked, studying the readouts with the keen intelligence that had made her one of the galaxy's most effective military commanders. Sarah ran the calculations again, hoping her initial projections were wrong. They weren't. 6 hours, maybe less. After that, the energy buildup will exceed the planet's geological stability limits. Meaning, Theron prompted, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. Meaning the planet explodes, Sarah said bluntly, and takes out everything in a 3-light-minute radius, including all the ships currently in orbit. Through the communication system, they could hear the growing panic as both friendly and capture forces detected the same energy readings Sarah was monitoring. Fleet commanders were requesting instructions, evacuation protocols were being discussed, and underlying it all was the terrifying reality that an entire world was about to become a weapon of mass destruction. We need to evacuate immediately, came Admiral Corveth's voice over the communication array. Corveth was Theron's most trusted commander, leader of the 7th Fleet that had arrived to rescue them. All ships are preparing for emergency departure. Negative, Sarah replied before either dragon could respond. If we evacuate now, the explosion will be even more devastating. The Crystal Network is feeding off electromagnetic activity. Every ship that jumps to hyperspace adds more energy to the system. She pulled up a holographic display showing the planet's crystal matrix. The formations were interconnected far more extensively than she had initially realized. What she had thought were separate clusters were actually nodes in a single, planet-spanning network. It's like a neural network, she explained to Theron and Lyralii. Every crystal formation is connected to every other formation through the planet's mineral structure. The energy isn't just building in one location. It's building everywhere simultaneously. Can the process be reversed? Theron asked, his ancient mind already working through the implications. Theoretically, yes, Sarah said, her fingers flying over multiple calculation matrices. But it would require precisely calibrated counter-resonance across the entire network. We need to generate exact opposite frequencies at every major node simultaneously. How many nodes are we discussing? Lyralii inquired. Sarah's answer made both dragons go very still. 3,417 major formations, spread across 6 continents. The magnitude of the task was staggering. Even with the combined fleets now in orbit, there weren't enough ships to place precise instruments at every crystal formation. And the timing would have to be perfect. Any deviation would only add more energy to the system. There's another possibility, Theron said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who was about to suggest something dangerous. Dragon neural networks can interface directly with crystalline matrices. If Lyralii and I were to link ourselves to the planet's crystal network, we might be able to control the resonance cascade directly. Sarah stared at him. That would mean channeling the energy of an entire planet through your nervous systems. The feedback could kill you. Probably would kill us, Lyralii agreed matter-of-factly. But it's the only option that has any chance of success. No, Sarah said firmly. There has to be another way. She turned back to her workstation, pulling up every piece of data she had collected about the planet's unique properties. There had to be something she was missing, some characteristic of the crystals that could provide another solution. As she worked, reports continued to flow in from the ships in orbit. The crystal formations were now visible from space, glowing like veins of fire across the planet's surface. Energy readings were climbing steadily toward the critical threshold. Dr. Chun, Admiral Corvetha's voice came through the communication system again. We're reading massive gravitational disturbances. The planet's core is destabilizing. Sarah checked her deep core sensors and felt her heart sink. The crystal network's energy was affecting more than just the surface formations. Deep beneath the planet's crust, the massive core crystals were beginning to resonate as well. When they reached critical frequency, they wouldn't just crack the planet, they would tear it apart at the molecular level. For hours, she announced grimly. That's all we have left. But as she studied the deep core readings, something caught her attention. The core crystals weren't just building energy, they were organizing it. The patterns emerging on her sensors looked almost intentional. That's impossible, she muttered, running the analysis again. What have you found? Theron asked, moving closer to examine her readings. The core crystals aren't just randomly absorbing energy. They're creating structured patterns, almost like they're trying to communicate something. Sarah enhanced the sensor resolution and felt her breath catch. The energy patterns weren't random at all. They were forming mathematical sequences, geometric structures, even what looked like linguistic constructs. The crystals are alive, she whispered. Both dragons went absolutely still. In galactic society, the discovery of a new form of intelligent life was governed by strict protocols. If the planet's crystal network was actually a form of consciousness, then everything changed. Are you certain? Lyralii asked urgently. Sarah ran every diagnostic she could think of. The patterns were too complex, too organized to be natural phenomena. Something was using the planet's crystal network to generate structured information. The resonance cascade, she said suddenly. It's not a malfunction. It's the crystals trying to communicate. The energy buildup is their attempt to broadcast a message. She quickly recalibrated her sensors to treat the energy patterns as potential communication rather than dangerous overload. Immediately, the readings began to make more sense. The crystals were indeed trying to transmit something, but the message was so complex and energy-intensive that it was threatening to destroy the planet in the process. Can you decode the message? Theron asked. I'm trying, Sarah replied, applying linguistic analysis algorithms to the energy patterns. But it's unlike any communication method I've ever encountered. Minutes passed as she worked, aware that every second brought them closer to planetary destruction. The energy levels continued to climb, but now she understood that the crystals weren't trying to explode, they were trying to speak. Finally, a partial translation began to emerge on her screens. Fragments of meaning that made Sarah's eyes widen with astonishment. Warning, ancient enemy. Returns from the void, preparing great ships, invasion fleet. She looked up at Theron and Lyralii with growing alarm. The crystals aren't just intelligent. They're trying to warn us about something. Something that's coming. Before either dragon could respond, new contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. Ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. But these weren't dragon vessels or any other design in the galactic database. The ships were massive, dark, and absolutely silent. No communication signals, no identification broadcasts, no response to hails. They simply hung in space like predatory shadows, and their very presence made Sarah's instruments register massive distortions in local space-time. Unknown vessels. Admiral Corvetha's voice came through the communication system, tight with tension. This is Admiral Corveth of the Dragon Imperial Navy. Identify yourselves immediately. The response was not words, but action. The alien ships began moving toward the inner system with speed that defied conventional propulsion physics. And as they moved, space itself seemed to warp around them. The Void Hunters, Lyralii breathed, her voice filled with an ancient dread. But they were destroyed millennia ago. The First War ended them. Apparently not, Theron said grimly. The Crystal Network's warning was accurate. They have returned. Sarah stared at the approaching ships, understanding flooding through her. The Crystal Network hadn't been malfunctioning. It had been trying to power up defensive systems that had been dormant for thousands of years. The planet itself was an ancient fortress, and the crystals were its consciousness, awakening to face an enemy that had returned from the depths of space. That's why the energy buildup looked so organized, she said. The crystals aren't trying to destroy the planet. They're trying to activate it. Activate it as what? Lyralii asked. Sarah's fingers flew over her controls as she connected to the planet's crystal network directly. Information flooded in her mind. Memories, purpose, desperate urgency. The truth hit her with staggering clarity. As a weapon, she said, Kepler, 442b isn't just a planet. It's the last guardian of this galaxy sector. And it's been waiting 10,000 years for the Void Hunters to return. The alien fleet was accelerating, their ships growing larger on the sensors. Behind them, Sarah could detect massive distortions that suggested even more vessels emerging from whatever dark dimension they called home. The Crystal Network is trying to charge the planet's primary weapon system, she continued, understanding more of the ancient consciousness's memories. But it needs more energy than it can generate alone. That's why it responded so strongly when you two added your bioelectric fields to the matrix. It needs living energy to complete the charging sequence. How much living energy? Theron asked, though his expression suggested he already suspected the answer. Sarah checked the power requirements against the energy signatures of every ship in orbit. The numbers were staggering. Everything we have, every dragon, every ship's crew, every living being in the system would need to contribute their life energy to power the weapon. And would survive the process? Lyralii asked quietly. Sarah met her eyes honestly. I don't know. The Void Hunter fleet was now close enough that individual ships could be distinguished. They were like nothing in the galactic databases, organic-looking but artificial, curved, and twisted as if space itself had been bent into ship-like forms. And as they approached, reality seemed to distort around them. Admiral Corvetha's voice came through the communication system, strained with effort. All ships report severe navigation difficulties. Something about those vessels is affecting space-time itself. Through her connection to the Crystal Network, Sarah could feel the ancient consciousness's growing urgency. The Void Hunters weren't just invaders. They were devourers of reality itself. If they established a foothold in this galaxy, they would begin unmaking the very fabric of space-time, turning the universe into something that served their alien purposes. We don't have a choice, she said finally. If we don't stop them here, they'll consume everything. She turned to address the communication system directly. All ships, this is Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm about to ask you to do something that goes against every survival instinct you have. But if we don't act together right now, there won't be a galaxy left to save. The approaching Void Hunter fleet had begun to accelerate again, and Sarah could feel time running out. The decision that would determine the fate of galactic civilization lay in her hands, and she was running out of time to make it. Sarah stood in the heart of her research station, surrounded by crystalline displays showing the approaching Void Hunter fleet. The ancient consciousness of Kepler, 442b, pulsed through her neural connection, sharing memories of the last time these entities had threatened galactic civilization. The images were terrifying. Entire star systems consumed, reality itself twisted into unrecognizable forms. Billions of lives snuffed out as the very concept of existence was remade to suit alien purposes. All ships, this is Dr. Chun, she broadcast on all frequencies. I need every dragon, every crew member, every living being in this system to trust me completely. The planet beneath us is an ancient guardian, and it needs our life energy to power a weapon that can stop the Void Hunters. But you need to understand, this isn't a battle we can win with conventional weapons. Admiral Corvetha's voice crackled through the communication system. Dr. Chun, you're asking us to voluntarily drain our life force into an alien planet. How do we know this isn't some form of trap? Before Sarah could respond, Theron stepped forward, his massive form radiating quiet authority. Because I'm telling you it isn't, Admiral. Dr. Sarah Chun saved my life, and the life of Duchess Lyralii, when she had no reason to help us. She exposed a conspiracy that would have plunged our empires into civil war. If she says this is our only chance, then I believe her. Lyralii moved to stand beside Theron, her sapphire scales gleaming in the crystal light emanating from the planet's surface. More than that, I can feel the truth of what she's saying through my neural connection to the crystal network. The consciousness in these formations is ancient, wise, and utterly dedicated to protecting this galaxy. It has waited 10 millennia for the Void Hunters to return, and it will not get another chance. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward both dragons, but there was no time for sentiment. The Void Hunter fleet was now close enough that their reality-warping effects were beginning to influence local space. Several of the orbiting ships reported navigation anomalies, and the star patterns visible through telescopes were beginning to shift in impossible ways. I need to establish neural links with as many beings as possible, Sarah announced, her hands flying over the crystal interface controls. The planet's consciousness can guide the process, but I need to serve as a focal point for the life energy transfer. The risk to you will be enormous, Theron warned. Channeling that much life force through a human nervous system could kill me, yes, Sarah agreed. But if we don't try, we're all dead anyway. And so is everyone else in the galaxy. She began establishing connections, using the crystal network's natural ability to interface with dragon neural systems and adapting her research equipment to extend the network to the human and other species aboard the various ships. One by one, minds began linking to the ancient consciousness that dwelled within Kepler, 442b's crystalline heart. The sensation was overwhelming. Thousands of individual life forces, each contributing their energy to a purpose larger than any of them could achieve alone. Sarah felt herself becoming a conduit for power that made her bones ache and her vision blur with coruscating energy patterns. Through the network, she experienced the memories and personalities of dragons who had ruled star systems for centuries, human crews who had spent their lives exploring the unknown, and dozens of other species, each adding their unique perspective to the growing Gestalt consciousness. But it was more than just power. As the neural network expanded, Sarah began to understand something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. The ancient planet mind wasn't trying to consume their life energy. It was trying to unite it into something greater than the sum of its parts. The weapon, she gasped, as understanding flooded through her. It's not just an energy beam. It's a consciousness weapon. The Void Hunters exist by unmaking reality, by imposing their alien understanding of existence over everything else. But unified consciousness, life force joined together in common purpose, that's something they can't unmake because it's the fundamental force that creates reality in the first place. The Void Hunter fleet had reached the outer orbital perimeter. Admiral Corvetha's ships opened fire with everything they had, but the energy beams and projectiles simply ceased to exist as they approached the alien vessels. The Void Hunters were already beginning to unmake local reality, preparing to transform the entire system into something that matched their twisted understanding of existence. But the planet-wide crystal network was finally approaching full charge. Sarah could feel the massive energy buildup reaching critical levels, but this time it was controlled, purposeful, united. The consciousness of every living being in the system was contributing to a single, focused intent. Now, Sarah whispered and activated the ancient weapon system. Light exploded from every crystal formation on Kepler 442b simultaneously. But it wasn't destructive energy, it was creative force. Pure consciousness, the fundamental stuff that reality was made from, lanced outward toward the Void Hunter fleet. The effect was immediate and absolute. Where the consciousness beam touched the alien ships, they didn't explode or disintegrate. They simply stopped existing in the way the Void Hunters had remade them, and began existing in the way that unified galactic consciousness understood reality to work. The organic mechanical hulls became normal matter. The reality warping field collapsed into conventional spacetime. The Void Hunters themselves, revealed now as the interdimensional parasites they truly were, found themselves suddenly subject to the physical laws of this universe rather than the twisted physics of their home dimension. But the weapon's effect went further than just the fleet. The consciousness beam propagated through hyperspace itself, following the dimensional pathways the Void Hunters had used to enter this reality. Sarah felt herself connected to an expanding network of awareness that reached across the galaxy, touching every world, every system, every living being. For a brief, glorious moment, the entire galaxy was united in a single consciousness, not dominated or controlled, but truly united, each mind maintaining its individuality while contributing to a greater understanding. Through this network, Sarah felt the presence of trillions of beings, all suddenly aware of each other, all understanding their connection to the vast community of life that filled the stars. And through that unified awareness, the galaxy itself rejected the Void Hunter's existence. The interdimensional tiers they had used to enter normal space sealed shut with finality. The alien entities found themselves trapped in a universe where their reality unmaking abilities simply didn't work. Faced with a cosmos that was truly alive, truly conscious, and truly united against them, the Void Hunters simply faded away. The consciousness beam gradually faded as the crystal network's energy finally stabilized at sustainable levels. One by one, the neural connections began to separate, allowing each individual mind to return to its normal state. But something fundamental had changed. The brief moment of galactic unity had left an indelible mark on everyone who had experienced it. Sarah collapsed to her knees, her human nervous system overwhelmed by the experience of channeling such vast energies. But she was alive, and as her vision cleared, she could see that Theron and Lyralii were also recovering from the ordeal. "Is it over?" she asked weakly. Theron, his ancient eyes bright with an inner light that hadn't been there before, nodded slowly. "The immediate threat is over. The Void Hunters have been banished from this dimension, and the tiers they used to enter our reality have been sealed. But something more has happened," Lyralii added, her voice filled with wonder. "The unity we experienced, it's changed us. All of us. I can still feel echoes of the connection to every other mind that participated." Sarah nodded. She could feel it too, a subtle awareness of the vast community of consciousness that filled the galaxy. It wasn't intrusive or overwhelming, just a gentle reminder that none of them were truly alone in the universe. Reports began flowing in from the orbiting ships. The Void Hunter vessels that hadn't been completely unmade by the consciousness weapon were now normal matter, Their crews either fled back to their home dimension or transformed into forms that could exist peacefully within normal space-time. More importantly, long-range sensors showed no further dimensional incursions anywhere in the local galactic region. Admiral Corveth to ground station came the familiar voice through the communication system. All ships report successful completion of the whatever we just did. No casualties, and all crew members report heightened awareness of, well, everything. Dr. Chun, what exactly did we just participate in? Sarah smiled weakly as she pulled herself back to her feet. We participated in the first truly democratic act in galactic history, Admiral. For the first time, every conscious being in this region of space had an equal voice in determining our collective fate. Over the following hours, as the immediate crisis fully resolved, the implications of what had happened began to sink in. The brief moment of galactic unity had done more than just defeat the Void Hunters. It had fundamentally altered the relationship between every species and civilization that had participated. Territorial disputes that had seemed irreconcilable suddenly appeared manageable when viewed from the perspective of galactic consciousness. Ancient prejudices and fears dissolved in the face of the undeniable truth that all conscious life was connected at the deepest level. The conspiracy that had targeted Theron and Lyralii crumbled completely as the surviving conspirators found themselves facing the unified opposition of every other conscious being who had experienced the neural link. Admiral Vex and his co-conspirators were quietly taken into custody by their own crews, who could no longer understand how they had ever supported such divisive goals. So what happens now? Sarah asked as she shared a meal with Theron and Lyralii in her restored research station. The planet's crystal formations had returned to their normal, sustainable glow, but Sarah could still feel the ancient consciousness dwelling within them, patient and watchful. Now we rebuild, Theron said thoughtfully, but not the old system of competing empires and conflicting interests. Something new, something that honors what we learned from our brief unity. A true galactic commonwealth, Lyralii agreed, where every species, every world, every individual consciousness has a voice in the decisions that affect us all. Sarah nodded, but her attention was drawn to her long-range sensors, which were detecting something new. Ships were arriving from across the galaxy. Not military vessels, but exploration ships, research vessels, passenger transports. Word of what had happened at Kepler 442b was spreading, and beings from every corner of galactic civilization were coming to see the place where everything had changed. They're coming to meet the human who saved the galaxy, Theron observed with amusement. Sarah shook her head. I didn't save the galaxy. We all saved the galaxy. Together. But as she watched more ships arriving each hour, Sarah realized that something even more significant was happening. The galaxy wasn't just coming to see the site of the victory over the Void Hunters. They were coming to experience the echo of unity that still lingered in the planet's crystal network. Each visitor who linked temporarily with the ancient consciousness left changed, carrying a fragment of that galactic awareness back to their home worlds. And those worlds, in turn, began reaching out to establish new forms of communication and cooperation based on the understanding that all consciousness was fundamentally connected. Within months, the old Galactic Council had been replaced by a new form of governance, one that included representation not just from major species, but from every conscious entity that wished to participate. Decisions were made through a process of guided consensus that drew on the lessons learned during the brief moment of perfect unity. And at the center of it all was a modest research station on Kepler 442b, where Dr. Sarah Chun continued her studies of the crystal formations that had made it all possible. She had become, almost accidentally, the galaxy's first ambassador to the ancient consciousness that dwelled within the planet's crystalline heart. But perhaps more importantly, she had proven something that would never be forgotten by any species in the galaxy, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or their weapons, but in their instinctive understanding that every conscious being deserved respect, help, and a chance to contribute to something greater than themselves. The woman who had rescued 2 frozen dragons from Snowstorm had ended up rescuing an entire galaxy. And in doing so, she had shown that the greatest battles weren't won through force or cunning, but through the simple recognition that all life, everywhere, was connected in ways that transcended species, politics, or the vast distances between the stars. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.